Welcome back to the Donkey Vote Political Podcast for another episode. Today we are joined by the member for Gippsland East or
Yeah.
Gippsland South. I always get you and Tim Bull mixed up. Um, yeah, so the member for Gippsland South, Danny O'Brien. Danny, thank you for joining us today.
No worries, and don't feel bad, Francis. So does the speaker. She always has to think when she does this. So sometimes one of us gets in trouble for no reason.
Is that you most of the time, or?
No, never, never. No, I'm always well behaved.
All right, then it's member for Gippsland South then.
Yeah.
All right then. Danny, just for our audience out there who may not know who you are, can you give them a little brief explanation of yourself just before we get into the questions?
Yeah, so member for Gippsland South, which is a little bit confusing because the main town in Gippsland South is Sale, which is not in South Gippsland, but basically an electorate that runs from Sale through Lochsport in the Gippsland Lakes and then down through South Gippsland through Yarram Foster, Leongatha Currumbara and beautiful Wilson's Promontory, rolling green hills. And I'm the Shadow Minister for Roads and Road Safety and Casino, Liquor and Gaming Regulation. And I've been in Parliament for nearly 10 years. I actually had a year in the Upper House and been the member for Gippsland South for about 9 years.
Great. I think some of our questions will be relating a little bit more to your parliamentary career and how you got into politics. But yeah, we'll get started now with our first question. So, how was your high school and university life, and do you have any memorable moments?
Probably so long ago I've forgotten them all. But I didn't have a university life. I got a cadetship straight out of high school. So in fact, even before I'd finished high school, I'd got a cadetship at a local newspaper and actually had to take leave to go back and do my exams because I got the job. I think I started in October. But high school was great. I went to it was an all-boys Catholic school for the first 3 years, and then that school actually went co-ed while I was there. So the last 3 years was a co-ed school. I loved it. It was a bit of everything. Boys schools were and are still fairly robust places, and the co-ed part of it was fantastic too. My mum was actually a teacher at the girls' school before we went co-ed, so that was always a bit of a challenge managing her. And Dad was a Shire councillor, so had a bit of a profile in the local region too. So that sometimes caused some issues. He actually came and addressed the school one day as the Shire president and all that sort of thing. But I guess from a political perspective, it was one memorable incident. My dad was a strong anti-communist through the 60s, 70s and 80s. And so I grew up watching the TV, always watching the news, being pretty aware of politics. And I got in trouble one day with a teacher. I was sitting up the back and I was talking and doing the wrong thing. And this one particular teacher, I don't know what his issue was, but he called out, "O'Brien, if you think you're God's gift to teachers, if you're so smart, tell me who the leader of the Polish Solidarity movement is." And I just said, Lech Walesa. And he could have asked probably 120 kids in my year level that question and they wouldn't have known it. But because I had this political background, I knew it. Anyway, he was, and all my student colleagues just turned around and were like, "I can't believe you knew that." And it incensed the teacher so much, he kicked me out. So I'm probably one of the few people that have been kicked out for getting a question right. But anyway, that was just a funny experience.
Yeah, seems like a pretty interesting teacher there.
Yes.
I think you went to Catholic Regional College Traralgon, correct me if I'm wrong, because we've talked to Martin Cameron and John Prosciutto, and they actually were and even Paul Edbrook, they were at school with you.
That's right.
While you were there.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty interesting coincidence.
Well, it speaks volumes. I don't think I haven't done the research, but I'm not sure that there'd be another school that has as many state parliamentarians as its alumni. It was St Paul's originally, both when John and Martin and I went there, and as I said, it became Catholic Regional College, and then Paul Edbrook's a little bit younger than the rest of us, but he was there as well, and we shared teachers and all sorts of things. In fact, John was down in the valley with Martin just 2 days ago and caught up with some of his old school friends. And we're looking forward at some stage to all four of us trying to get there and go and speak to the current students, because it's pretty unusual, particularly for a small regional school or smaller regional school to have so many political alumni.
Yeah, yeah, that is very, very interesting. And I think Martin Cameron, we did interview him a couple of days ago, and he was telling us that you guys are trying to plan to get a whole group photo together in front of the school, hopefully
Mm.
before Christmas. So hopefully that does happen.
Well, we were going to do it the other day, but the kids have already finished, so it
Oh,
would probably be better to go when there's someone to go and talk to and have a good look around the school. So we'll try and do it next year, I think. Now,
yeah. And just also touch on your point there about the anti-communist movement. My family as well was pretty heavily anti-communist because my grandfather left the Labour Party and joined the DLP in
well,
1955. So
I,
yeah,
I
I can kind of relate to that sort of movement and what your dad used to preach about as a Shire councillor.
absolutely. Well, I didn't mention it, but yes, Dad also joined the DLP. So
Oh, really? Oh,
the DLP,
boy, my grandfather and your dad might have known each other back in the
quite
day.
possibly, yeah, back in the
Yeah,
day, yeah,
because
yeah,
my my grandfather knew a lot of the high-ranking DLP members, so like Frank McManus,
yep,
Vincent Gare, all those guys. So they probably met one time or something at a
quite possibly,
meeting, like a DLP meeting somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, no doubt. So yeah, no, so it's interesting background. It's funny as some of the when I came into Parliament and gave my inaugural speech, some of the Labor MPs sort of came up afterwards and said, "Oh yeah, my dad was DLP too, or my grandfather or my mum or whoever." And there was a bit of a connection there, but across the current party lines anyway.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the MPs nowadays, I think the Minister for Trade, Don Farrell, I think his dad was DLP, something like that. So there's
Yep.
heaps of them. So
Yeah.
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 We'll get now on to our second question. I think is that with you, George?
Yeah, I have it. So my question is similar to your colleague in Gippsland East, Mr. Bull. You worked in the newspaper industry before Parliament. Before later taking up roles in the broadcasting at Win News and Southern Cross News. Could you talk to us a bit about your roles in the media before politics and answer the big question? Were you a better journalist than Tim Bull?
Oh, that's easy. Of course, I was. Actually, it's funny how things happen. I grew up in Traralgon, as we said. Bully's an East Gippsland boy, Meetung, Bairnsdale, that area. But my first work experience actually was at the Bairnsdale Advertiser, which I think was outside of the normal schoolwork experience I did in the school holidays from memory. And Tim Bull was a journalist there at that time. So that's literally 33 years ago, I think. So yeah, so I saw a little bit of him firsthand when I had no idea what I was doing, and I think we'd probably call it a draw. I'm sure he was an excellent local journo as well. Look, it was a great career for me. I had some really good advice actually early on in my school days, where a colleague of my dad's who'd actually been a journalist as well. He said to me, "Don't try and get a cadetship at the Herald Sun or the Age or whatever. Get a cadetship at a local country paper, because you'll do a bit of everything. You'll be writing stories from day one, virtually, and you'll get lots of experience." And it was actually really good advice. And so when I decided I wanted to be a journalist, I set about writing to a whole lot of the newspapers around the state, including TV stations as well. And I've still got some of the replies I got because I was so excited about them at the time, and some of them are really nice and very encouraging. And then it so happened a position came up at the Gippsland Times here in Sale, as I said, just at the end of my year 12 year, and I applied for that and was lucky enough to get it. So it was a great experience, your first job, but you're also first time out of home and learning on the job, learning about life, and as I said, journalism was great for getting a broad sweep of what goes on in the community. I've always said it's a classic jack of all trades, master of none type role, where you know a little bit about everything and probably sets you up very well for going into politics, actually.
Yeah, 100%. I think, journalism in general, it does make you a little bit more of a community activist. And from a lot of the politicians we've talked to, a lot of them did start out in their political careers as community activists, starting out with an issue within their local community that they want to fix. So I guess with journalism as well, as you said, you know, you're going to be around a lot of issues in the community, and you'll be around people who have issues that they want talked about more. And since you're reporting on them, you kind of yourself develop your own ideas and develop your own things that you want to be changed within your local community as well.
Yeah, to a degree. I probably didn't really start to develop those sorts of thoughts until I started working in politics. But of course, I'd always had an interest and an involvement. And you, as a journalist, probably not so much at the local newspaper, which was a bit more local stuff, and you were going out and visiting schools and local events and the like. When I went into TV, so I had about 2 years at the newspaper, and then went to what was then called Southern Cross TV, based in Traralgon. So I moved back to Traralgon. Then you're out interviewing people every day and doing stories every day on local issues, including political issues and issues that are attracting the attention of government one way or the other. And so that was probably where I more started to think about it. I genuinely remember seeing a media advisor hand me a media release and then jump back in the ministerial car and head off to the next event as I was rushing to get back to write the third story for the day. And I remember thinking, that looks like a pretty cruisy job. I reckon I could do that. And I suppose that was maybe not the first thought of politics, given the family background, but certainly the first thought of potentially working in politics, and that is ultimately what I did. But it certainly wasn't all beer and Skittles. I did, as I said, 2 years at the Gippy Times, then went to Southern Cross TV as a young reporter. And 12 months later, they shut down the local news service. So I got retrenched at the age of 19. I remember being absolutely devastated at the time. I'd just taken out a car loan, and not that you have major responsibilities and commitments as a 19-year-old, but to get retrenched at 19 was devastating for me personally at the time. It turned out to be the best thing that ever happened, because 3 days later I got picked up by the rival station, Vic TV, which became Win TV, and never looked back. Got a job there and worked there for a number of years. So it was good, but yeah, you have ups and downs as well.
Yeah. I like just touch on that point as well when you were talking about ministerial advisors. That does relate a lot to our next question with Tobias.
Yeah. Danny, you also worked as a political advisor for past members of Parliament, including former Deputy Prime Minister Mark Vaile. How did these advisory work prepare you for state parliament?
Well, very well, I guess, in that probably particularly I did 4 years working for Peter Ryan, initially as his media advisor and then chief of staff for most of the time I was there. And he was a great mentor and still is. But I probably really got an understanding of politics then, and got an understanding also of how state parliament works. So when I did come back some 10 years later, I already had a bit of a familiarity with it. Working for Mark Vaile and later Barnaby Joyce in federal parliament, though, we were in government, and that was a very, very different experience. I don't think I realised for the 4 years with Peter Ryan the whole scope of government and politics that I'd been missing. And so working as an advisor for a minister is a very different scenario, and you're managing your party room, the members of parliament. You're managing their expectations and trying to assist them, and you're also managing stakeholders and departments and dealing with briefs. There's a lot of paperwork coming through a ministerial office, but it probably gave me that understanding of the way policy decisions are formulated, both coming up from department with advice, but also coming the other way from the party organisations and cabinet and the like. And so that was invaluable experience to give me an idea of what had happened, but also just that time experience, just the history, knowing some of the history of what's been done, what's been tried, who was who, and all that sort of thing. I came into being an MP with a pretty good understanding of it, which I think stood me in very good stead.
Yeah. So when you were working for Mark Vaile and Barnaby Joyce, you were based in Canberra. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Initially, when I worked for Mark Vaile, I was able to be based in Melbourne and travel up and down, and then I got a senior advisor position, and we had to move to Canberra. So So we have, I think, 6 years in Canberra in total, and it was a great time. But people have got really probably no idea what ministers do. Certainly not what advisors do. It's not a job for a person with a young family or anything like that. In my view, it's full on. It's great fun and very exciting and high octane. But you're flying all around the countryside. You're constantly chasing a minister. You're trying to get a couple of minutes of their time to get answers to questions on issues that need addressing. You're assisting with briefs and policy decisions, and Canberra was good, and I saw a lot of the country in that role, which was also great. But it's a full-on job. You would want to do it for decades, I don't think.
Yeah, you kind of need a break in between that, Maybe it's a bit more maybe like if you've got an established family already, I guess. Moving to Canberra wouldn't be too bad, but especially as you said with a young family, that sort of change is pretty difficult. And also, you talk about Peter Ryan there being his media advisor beforehand. He was the previous member of Gippsland South, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong there as well. So, are you still in contact with Peter Ryan even to this day? And does he offer you a lot of advice?
Yeah, I am indeed. And I got to say, he's not just sucking up to him, but he's probably the perfect former member. He's there when I need him, but he's also not over my shoulder constantly saying, you should do this, you should do that. We catch up for a coffee probably every 4 or 5 months, and sometimes it's for him to download on the politics of the day. Sometimes it's for me to, or generally both, it's for me also to say, what would you have done with this? And so he's been really good in that respect, and certainly been, as I said, probably the model former MP for a sitting MP, because he's there when I need him, but he's also not sticking his nose in and telling me what to do. So it's been great.
Yeah, and I'm guessing a lot of the advice he does give you, especially with policy development and that sort of thing, is pretty invaluable, especially because he was Deputy Premier for about 4 years as well during the Baillieu and Napthine governments. Yeah,
and we talk about that sort of thing, but probably more so the day-to-day politics, and particularly initially in my first 4 or 5 years, probably I'd often be asking him about local constituent issues. What would you have done with this? This issue came up. How would you have handled it? And so he was very helpful with that sort of thing too. But certainly he was leader of the Nationals for, let me get this right, 14 years, and Deputy Premier for 4, as you said, and a minister, and certainly had a lot of experience, and one of the best orators that I've seen in politics. And always tried to learn a bit from him.
Yeah, for sure. We'll now move on to our 4th question. So, Danny, you also spent time as a trade advisor to the Australian Embassy in Jakarta and the CEO of the National Irrigators Council. Could you talk to us a bit about your work in these industries and also how is your Indonesian coming along?
Tidak baik. Tidak baik. I think not good. It used to be good. I actually, so I went to Indonesia, as I said, we moved to Canberra. When we got to Canberra, my wife got a job with DFAT, Foreign Affairs and Trade, and ultimately she got a posting to Jakarta. So I went as the handbag and looking after our little ones, but ended up getting a job in the embassy as well as an agriculture and trade advisor, given my background. And that was fantastic, amazing experience, just me and my wife, our 2 little kids, and 22 million of our closest friends there in Jakarta. But it was a hard city to love, but we loved the experience, and the Indonesian people were wonderful. So I actually ended up, between the nanny and the driver and a 2-week training course, I actually spoke a reasonable amount of Indonesian. I could sort of hold a conversation. Sadly, most of it's gone now, but probably if I went back there, I'd pick a bit up. But look, it was a great job seeing another country, not only through a visitor or a tourist size, but then as an expat, as a locally engaged person in an embassy. So dealing with their government was fascinating, maddening sometimes, gratifying, being able to do a lot of things we were, genuinely, and the DFAT people are amazing. The work they do, always with the interests of Australians at heart. And in my case, it was sort of Australian exporters and the agricultural sector, which has always been a passion of mine. So yeah, that was fantastic. And then likewise, the job that I had before that was the CEO of the National Irrigators Council. Other than my current job, probably my favourite job ever. I was the boss of a national industry organisation. I had really, really good members who were so supportive of my efforts, but really let me run the show. And it was probably my whole career up to that had led to it in that I'd done the journalism side of things, so I had the communication skills. I'd done the politics sort of things, so I understood government and how it worked, and then bringing that together to be both an advocate for a group of irrigators as well as a spokesman for them in the media and the public generally was a great experience, and I loved it. So it was a shame I had to give it up to go to Jakarta, but it was a great job.
Oh, so you were CEO of the National Irrigators. You were CEO of the National Irrigators Council just before you went to Jakarta.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Yeah,
okay.
We actually we were having twins, and literally the Victorian election where Peter Ryan and his team won in 2010. We got the news the day before that election that my wife had been posted to Jakarta. And so I got calls on the Sunday night saying, "We've won. Would you like to come and work for us?" And I was like, "Sorry, we've got twins coming next month, and we're going to Jakarta in 6 months." So, or 12 months, I think it was. So, yeah, it was but it was a great experience, and yeah, really enjoyed it.
Mm. So so this is not actually too long ago at all. It's only just over 10, 11 years ago that you were posted in Jakarta. Yeah.
We went
just
to Jakarta.
before. Just before running for pre-selection.
A little bit before that. So we had the posting was meant to be 3 years, and we went in 2011. Started 2012. Yeah, started 2012. And as I said, because there's a long lead up in those sort of postings, my wife had full-time language training for 6 months, I think it was, as well as maternity leave, and then. So we were there, and then we were meant to be there for 3 years, but other things came up for me, and I came back a little bit early, and then the family followed me after that.
Yeah, interesting life experience, Danny. Very interesting. Not a typical. Not many people, get the opportunity to go to Indonesia and work as a trade advisor in the Australian Embassy. So, yeah, it's something you should tell the grandkids eventually.
Yeah. Oh well, and I mean, I'm so proud of my wife, having been a diplomat, literally. She did a fantastic job over there. She was sort of the cultural attaché, so she was doing fun stuff, promoting Australia and promoting cultural ties and that sort of thing. But it was a great experience. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've lived in small country towns. I've lived in big cities. I've lived in regional cities. I've lived overseas in London, in Jakarta, and travelled around the world as well. So it's all very good. Grounding and experience, I guess, for the job that I do now.
Yeah, for sure. We'll now move on to our fifth question. Tobias?
Yes, I do have this. Who would you say is your political role model and idol?
Peter
I
Ryan?
don't really have idols, and I wouldn't necessarily even say I have a role model, but probably, as I alluded to before, Peter Ryan is certainly someone that, having worked very closely with him and seen him in action, I've learned a lot from him. And I must say there's times in my current role where you might be thinking of sending a particular email or posting something a bit risque or a bit silly or a bit aggressive or something on social media, and you think, would Peter Ryan have done this? And that sometimes it makes you decide yes or no. So probably Peter, definitely. And I don't really have others. I mean, to be honest, and I hate to sound like a conservative because I probably wouldn't describe myself as that, but John Howard I had a lot of respect for in what he did as Prime Minister. Obviously, I worked as an advisor in the last term of his government, but his longevity, his ability to sort of listen to the mood of the people, and his capacity to take hard decisions that weren't necessarily popular, GST, the Iraq War, many others over a period of time. And I think the legacy that we saw of economic reform under Hawke, Keating, and then Howard and Costello, I think has stood this country in very good stead. So, yeah, I don't really have idols. I saw a statement a little while ago that I think probably fits me best. The only person I want to be better than is the person I was yesterday, and that's probably something that I try to aspire to, not try and be like someone else necessarily.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's something even me, Tobias, and George could take on as well. Like, it's always important to, even if you don't have idols, just try and be the best person that you can be as well. In any circumstance is always important. So that's actually a pretty good piece of advice. That's probably something you could have said for our last question, but yeah, it's probably something our viewers and even ourselves should take on as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I've got plenty of advice.
You got some more for our last question, Danny.
Yeah. So I think the last question is, what advice would I give to students your age?
Yeah. So we'll save it till we get to that last question because we still have one more in between.
Sure.
And I think that's with George.
Yeah. So what made you run for pre-selection in 2014 for the National Party?
I guess all those years working for a politician, which was not all those years. I had about 8, I think, all up in different jobs, and about a dozen or so years in journalism and other jobs. But I guess when you're working with a politician and they're getting a question on radio or they're talking to a constituent in the street and they answer a certain way, you go, ooh, would I have said that? I wouldn't have said that. If it was me, I would have said this. And you actually start to think, oh, would I want to do it? Is that something I want to do? And in my case, and the reason I'm with the Nationals, long before I got interested in politics, I've always felt country people get a raw deal, that we're always forgotten, and the cities dominate so much of our political, media, cultural life. And so, so I guess it was that passion, is the same passion that drew me to work for the National Irrigators Council, the same role, same passion as working as a trade advisor and agricultural advisor in Jakarta. I wanted to do things for country people, and that's why I got into it. Probably when the opportunity first came up, an opportunity to nominate for an upper house position in Victoria it wasn't my first choice at the time, and I initially said, no thanks, that's not really me. And when they came back to me, I guess, and suggested there was a path potentially to move to the lower house in the longer term, and really have your own neck of the woods to look after. I guess I realised, having worked in politics, you don't get second opportunities. A lot of people that we over the years have talked to about running for parliament, they say, "Oh, I'd love to, but the kids have just started secondary school, or I've just taken over the business, or I've just finished my degree in such and such, and I'm going to move into this part of work." And so, not now, but maybe later. And I just know more often than not, later doesn't come up. So I knew there was an opportunity there and really should take it. So some serious conversations with my wife, and decided to take the bull by the horns, and was lucky enough to just win pre-selection for an upper house seat, and then 12 months later moved down to the lower house when Peter retired.
Yeah, I guess with politics, as you said, you don't get second chances. So you get the opportunity, you might as well take with both hands and go for it, because that opportunity may not appear again. So, and also, I forgot to say with your previous question as well, you are very, very active with social media, as I've seen with a lot of your posts over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, it's good. It's really good. Your posts are pretty entertaining, Danny.
I'm not sure they're good. I think one of the balances that's difficult to reach as a politician is social media. People don't really want politics on it. There's a core of people, that particularly your own supporters, that want to see you talking about how bad the government is and what you're doing. But most people are not interested. So we often joke, and Tim Bull makes the comment all the time. He can put the best political comment or statement or policy or something on Facebook, but he'll never overtake the popularity of the video he put up of a tiger snake swimming across a lake. which is that's social media for you. Anything with pets or something a bit silly tends to do a lot better on social media than anything heavily political.
Yeah. And I guess it's all about, to get that political outreach, I guess it's all about, engaging your audience. So those sort of comedic videos and posts are always very, very good and helpful.
Well, I guess one thing social media has done for politicians to some degree is give the public an insight to their humanness, their personality, their humanity. We're not robots. We're not just politicians all the time. We are in the veggie patch, and we are checking the rain gauge, and we are out camping and seeing snakes and that sort of stuff. And I guess there's a balance between informing your community and telling them what you're up to on their behalf, and also just being a bit flippant and showing a bit of your personal side.
How are you going over there, Curly? Old darling.
You are one of the most unctuous, self-righteous people I have come across. Always preaching as though to say that people who don't agree with everything you say are somehow racist, bigoted and immoral.
This is a salmon that actually jumps on the hook for you.
All right. So after a little short ad break, hopefully our viewers went to go get some food, get some tea for our big final question, our most important question of the whole podcast. We're back now with Danny, Tobias, George, and myself. So yeah, our final question to you, Danny, is what's one piece of advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are starting university or high school?
I'm gonna cheat and not make it one piece of advice, but probably that bit of life advice for someone in finishing high school or going on to university is, I think in the modern world, make yourself as adaptable and flexible as possible. I think that doesn't mean necessarily that you don't specialise if you want to be a surgeon or if you want to be an architect or whatever. That's absolutely fine, but give yourself the skills and the capacity, and I don't necessarily mean just the technical skills from training or education, but the life skills to be able to adapt. I think and particularly with technology changing, I think we don't yet even understand what AI is going to do to our future. So in a career sense, be as flexible and as adaptable as you can be. And I guess there's a couple of quotes that I love from a political perspective or a community perspective. There's two of them. The world is run by those who turn up. So if you want to actually have a say in how the world is, get involved. Get involved in a political party, get involved in your local community group, get involved with your council, your footy club, your netball club, whatever it may be. And likewise, the other quote I love is that if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And too many people aren't interested in government, but the government is interested in you, and it impacts your life every day. You don't necessarily need to be involved in trying to influence it, but be aware of it. And certainly, my advice is get involved. Sitting on the couch playing Xbox is fun for so long, but you don't have to get involved in politics, but get involved in your community. But yes, there's so much to be out there, whether it's sport, whether it's community groups, whether it's arts, cultural, theatre, whatever it might be. Get involved and make it happen and turn up, because the world is run by those who turn up.
Exactly. I think that's a huge issue, especially for our generation, especially like a lot of people our age. I think it is starting to get a bit better, but a lot of people in the younger generations just aren't as politically informed as, you know, the millennials and people in Gen X and that sort of thing. So I think it is really important, especially for us young people, to be politically engaged. And even if you aren't part of a political party, like just at least know what's going on within government and how it could affect your life. Is so important because, you know, even if a lot of people think politicians are just like these, you know, these human beings that aren't really human at all, like they're here to actually support you and, you know, create policies to make your life better. So it's so important that you are politically engaged and you understand the issues that are being talked about because they are going to affect your life. Believe it or not, they are.
Yep, absolutely. That's spot on. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So those are all our questions for you, Danny. I'd like to thank you again for joining us. I realize that it is getting close to Christmas and I've been actually working as an intern at Shunglu's EO office locally here. So I do understand it is a very busy time within the political landscape. So I appreciate you spending a couple 45 to 50 minutes with us and discussing these important questions with our audience.
Not a problem, boys. Thank you. It was great to talk to you and to have the engagement with so obviously some very engaged young people. So congratulations on doing the work you're doing and all the best for the future.